Gentlemen, I'm going to call this joint meeting together today, with joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission here on September the 7th at 2023. Welcome everybody here today that's in the audience here today and anybody in the virtual world. All right, Mr. Chairman.
And also call the Northumberland County Planning Commission together. Appreciate everybody coming out, taking time. Looking forward to a good meeting. And also Patrick, a very warm welcome back from all of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, glad to see Patrick back. All right. Susan, it's all yours.
Okay. I do have coming several other RSDC counties zoning ordinances as well, because, you know, frankly, one of the benefits of being a member is instead of reinventing the wheel, you've got localities and planning directors in those localities that are members that you can pull from ordinances, things that might be applicable. So in reviewing y'all's ordinance, I thought the approach I would take tonight is go through your ordinance and ask you all a few questions, because really how you further flesh out your ordinance, in my opinion, depends on what kind of solar facilities you all want, you plan to attract. In my previous meeting here, I got the impression that you all were sort of at the end of the line. It does not appear from that conversation, if I'm remembering correctly, you all are going to be in a position to attract projects over, 150 megawatts that are going to sit on, several thousand acres. Now, I could be wrong, and if I am, tell me. But if you all are going to be sort of targeted for small projects, things 20 megawatts, 5 megawatts. And the other thing I would advise is, I believe you're heavily in co-op country. I guess Northern Neck is your co-op. I think I had mentioned, have you had any conversations or in the past, or do you have any planned? Because if the co-ops are going to do behind the meter projects, connecting from substation to substation for use by co-op members only, that is not considered utility scale solar, and you need a definition that defines that kind of behind the meter usage. I would recommend Brunswick County is in Mecklenburg co-op territory. They have a lot of co-op, and in Brunswick County we developed a definition of behind the meter solar that is not utility scale. And I'm hoping that one of the documents that was emailed to me while I was driving was the Brunswick ordinance, and certainly at our next meeting I can bring it, but in the meantime I'll be sure to get you the ordinance. So I would handle that in your definition section, because most ordinances, and ours included in Sussex, most ordinances start with definitions. And so I think one recommendation I would make is you want to add a definition to address co-op projects. And if anybody has any, insight on any conversations you've had with the co-ops, that would be helpful. So.
What size projects are they?
Those behind the meters are always, I'd almost bet my house, always less than 20 megawatts. So the other question is, and I cannot recall what, if any, conversations you all have had with Dominion, or did they plan on doing any projects? Because we have been very upfront in our county with Dominion. If you're interested in working with Dominion, they're happy to hear it. And, we've got a freestanding battery storage project that is for Dominion in our county. So if you haven't reached out to Dominion, I would, because if they have any interest, you would want to make sure that you're sort of gauging your ordinance towards that. So, you know, I don't want to get into y'all's business. Have you been approached by any outside developers looking for projects? You know, because if
None
you
that I know
haven't,
of.
okay.
Philip, we have anything?
No?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Have you had any dialogue with the co-op, though, about any projects for them?
We haven't.
You haven't?
I mean, it's been specific over who's going to serve, whether it's Dominion or Northern Electric, but it's still
Okay.
through the private landowner.
Yeah, okay. Well, I would encourage you, because definitions matter in these ordinances, so if the co-op really does have an interest in doing a project for their own members, you really do want to define that, because it isn't utility scale solar, because it's not being loaded up to the grid and sold, and that is the difference maker. As a matter of fact, PJM prohibits the co-ops from uploading that power to the grid. If it's behind the meter, it has to stay behind the meter. So, the other question, I think you need some more definitions. And again, if you have, you know, I'm most familiar with my county's ordinance because I helped write it. But if you have the Sussex ordinance in front of you, I would just kind of draw your attention to our definitions. And the other question is, do you all have any identified old industrial sites that might be good for solar, that someone could put a small project on? We do in Sussex, so we defined our brownfield for the purpose of solar, you know, in our ordinance. So when you're fleshing out your definitions, you do want to think about where would it go? You know, where might we put this stuff? Because if you've got industrial or brownfield sites, you want to flesh that out in your definitions. So I would definitely do a little diving in on your definitions. The other issue, and I didn't see in here, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but most zoning ordinances are going to spell out where the various types of solar that you've identified are what kind of zoning district they're permitted in. So agricultural, you know, general industrial, you know, I don't know if you have I-1, I-2, or B1, how you do it, but I think it would be good early on to clarify in your, to clarify where solar is permitted and in what kind of zoning, because when a developer is going to pull up your ordinance to see, you know, could we ever fit out here, you know, if putting in a project's going to require rezoning, you know, they're probably going to go, oh, juice not worth the squeeze. But I would recommend you spell out where solar is permitted, in what kind of zoning.
We do have it, but we have a separate table of usages that isn't attached
Okay,
to these.
so I would recommend, when they pull up the zoning, does that come up? Is it attached to it, or?
It's a separate.
It's attachment A at the top of the page. and
Okay, okay,
A lot of times people don't see it, and we have to point them to it.
Yeah.
But we don't have it embedded in each section of the zoning ordinance, which
Yeah, well, you may want to take your chart, and sort of embed that at the front. Again, not that it makes it great or right, but that's what we did in Sussex, and, I think from the outsiders looking in, they've appreciated having it readily available in the ordinance, just for clarity's sake. So I would maybe recommend doing that. The other thing that we spend a lot of time on, and again, from the outsider looking in, from the developer's point of view, and to save you guys a whole lot of phone calls and fishing expeditions, we launch into early our conditional use permit process. And we really spell that out, and I'm finding that most of our localities address in the process the 2232 review, and what our public meeting process, our community meeting process, we spell that out clearly. And because you guys aren't in sort of one of the counties that's under the tidal wave like we are right now, when we did our zoning, we wanted to make this, zoning for dummies 101. In other words, when the developers pull this up, they'll have a real good idea, is this a county where we can go or not go, and what is the process? Again, for our great big planning department of 2 people, we did the zoning to try to answer as many questions up front about our process, as opposed to our 2 planning people spending their life on the phone with these, the sea of developers out there. So we have a pretty robust CUP process. We do address in our CUP process the siting agreement, and I know you have that in here. You talk about your siting agreement. And we also reference the code citation, the 15.2.23.16.7. And so you have incorporated that, but I would go in a little more detail about your actual CUP, and sort of the public process, the hearing process, and the actual application, which you've got your requirements in here. You might want to pull those out as a separate section, the actual application process. So if you're the developer, again, thinking about it from the outside looking in, all they want to do is tick the box. If I want to come to Northumberland County with a project, I need to go check, 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 check. Oh, excuse me. So you want to make it very explicit. What do we require of the developer? And so, I would recommend, because you've got a lot of the pieces in here, but I would definitely segment them out. The conditional use permit itself, the application process, what is required on the front end. And decommissioning we have at the very end, because that is really sort of at the end of the road. There are a couple things that I think you're a little, I was trying to do a comparison of the 2. I did not see in here anything about a road bond. I saw, I think, a landscape agreement in a bond for landscaping, but I will tell you from communities that, including ours, and some others that have had big projects, road damage is huge. that is a potential impact on the citizens. And most localities are requiring a road bond, and spell out in the zoning that any damage that occurs to the road during construction is to be repaired at the developer's expense. Again, most folks requiring a bond up front. And the developers aren't fighting this. I've never heard one that fought it. You know, if you don't address it in your ordinance, Surrey County had a very bad experience with strata, and some serious road damage. They did not address it in their CUP. They had a bit of a tug of war with them. So I would definitely recommend that be addressed. We have it done out as a construction schedule. You know, but the road bond, you can put that as part of your CUP process. You can lay it out in a couple different, you know, areas. You know, we have some maintenance requirements in our construction process. Again, ours is detailed, and what I had Morgan email you. This is our third revised solar zoning ordinance, because again, as we've gone through it, we have learned, and so every update, we take the bad that happened and how are we going to revise the ordinance to address that and cover that. So I would definitely use some. I would address the road damage, because I can tell you it's coming.
The road you're talking about, is this public road?
Yes.
Or private road?
The public roads.
VDOT doesn't make any kind of scenario along this line? If you're damaging the public road, why aren't they doing some of this?
It is, how do I say this politely?
Hey, you can say with VDOT, we don't care.
I would not want to depend on VDOT to
I wouldn't either.
hurry up and get a road repaired. And yes, that developer, my county and my planning director are going to go after that developer a whole lot harder for the money to fix this road than VDOT is. And they're going to do it on a much accelerated time schedule. Surrey County, and what happens in Surrey, that's a 4,000 acre project, and they've done a 2,000 acre addition to it. So on something that size, you've got 2 or 3 roads into the county, and you've got, and most of the access points were on pave-in-place rural roads, and within a matter of a month, those roads were literally crumbling. So again, your road bond is going to be adjusted to the size of the project. If you're doing a 5 megawatt project with 10 acres of panels, 20 acres of panels, you're not going to have the duration of construction, the amount of truck traffic, all of that. So,
Ma'am, with that in mind, could also be put in that road bond, perhaps the shortest distance to a project might not be the best approach if you have to go through a residential area or something, whereby we could set it up so they could have to maybe approach the project from a different way. It might be a little bit longer, but we could keep them out of a residential area.
yes, and you can put that in your zoning, that, you know, truck traffic isn't to come through a residential area. You know, there are gatekeepers you can put up in your zoning, and also you can address the road bond and construction entrances. They are always going to be project specific. So again, in our county, we meet on site with the developer, and we tell them this is going to be your access point, because we know what the daily traffic is. And we had one project, we actually did a traffic count they wanted to argue with us a little bit. So, you know, again, if you, as much guidance as you give them, you know, you're driving the bus. And I think as specific as you can be in your zoning, the more on the front end you've prevented a lot of those problems on the back end. And certainly it is within your rights to say, we're not going to have any construction traffic coming through a residential area, through a subdivision. They're going to have to deal with it. So, yeah.
Okay.
Problematic with the necklace.
So you've got your buffer language in here, I see. Do you have anything in here about minimum distances from dwellings? Setback from the state maintained road. But I didn't see anything. So do you have anything about a minimum setback from a house, from a business?
Just a property line, which is
Okay.
minimum unless it's addressed through conditional use.
I would definitely recommend having a minimum distance from a dwelling, from a business, from a, we have a 300-foot minimum from a dwelling in our locality. I know there are some that have 200 feet. Some have as much as 400 feet. You know, you're pretty spread out here. If you're in a county like Prince George that's kind of on the bubble that has a little more dense housing, you know, a minimum of 300 feet, you know, so you can put language in there that if you need to go beyond 300, you can. So you can do that. But I would definitely recommend for your homeowners putting a setback distance in there, homes and businesses. The other, I don't think you addressed internal setbacks in the project. And basically, the way we look at it, what is behind the fence? We don't have, for internal roads, for the substation, anything inside the fence, we let them design that project. You know, we stay out of their way inside the project. So you might want to address it, you know, behind the fence and in front of the fence. We do that. I think most folks are doing that. You may want to put, and again, this is more of a deal on the big projects, but language for wildlife corridors requiring those on the bigger projects. So you've got a way for the critters to pass through. Most people are doing that, and I did not see that in yours. I think the big, one thing just as a, something that's coming in the industry, the first one I've heard of is in Halifax County. If you've got a height requirement on the panels, and I believe we do a 15 feet in ours, most folks put, you know, the panels can't be any higher than 15 feet in the air is typical. In Halifax, they are now double stacking the panels. Yep. So in other words, smaller footprint, more panels. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of us are, in a year or two, probably going to find us having to change our height requirements because, again, as with any industry, technology changes. So you may not be able to hide them as well because they're really trying to make better efficient use of the land. So I think you should address the panel height in there. I want to go to a couple things on decommissioning that are really important that I did not see. I don't, it was very good. You have the salvage value can't be used towards decommissioning. That is very wise. I would recommend that you add language that all of the underground steel, concrete cabling needs to be removed regardless of depth.
It's in there,
It's in there, okay, okay. You got that?
under E.
Below and above ground. Okay, just on the way that's worded, our first project, they said, we're gonna remove everything down to 3 feet. And if it's below 3 feet, we're gonna leave it. So you might, you know, I don't know how they'd interpret that, above or below ground. You know, that seems pretty clear to me, but some of these guys can be sneaky, so just, you know, watch out for that. On your decommissioning, when you revisit the amount of the bond, and you do your, you've got the language in here about at the developer's expense, you're going to do your 5-year benchmarking on is the bond adequate? No, you. Okay. I don't see it here in big E. So are you doing your bond evaluation every 5 years? Is that what you're doing?
Above in 17 small c
Okay,
is where that is located. And we proposed 2 years.
okay.
But
You'll,
when-
yeah, you'll probably get pushback on 2 years. I'm just gonna give you the heads up on that. I think they're gonna say that that's gonna get too expensive. I'm not aware of anybody, every ordinance I'm aware of does it at 5-year increments. So, you know, again, it's your choice. I'm just, you know, you might get pushback from a developer on that. We have language in ours that, if the decommissioning reclamation cost estimate, it should be recalculated every 5 years, and the surety shall be updated accordingly. If the recalculated estimate cost exceeds the original estimated cost by 10%, then the owner or occupant shall deposit additional funds into the escrow account to meet the new cost estimate. So you might want to build some protection in that if the assessment of, is this bond really adequate to tear this thing down if we had to tear it down? And I think we're wise to know that things don't get less expensive, they only get more expensive. So I would put some protection that the bond be adjusted, whatever the surety method you're using, be adjusted to reflect whatever increased costs there may be. And again, we've got that on page 8 of our ordinance if you want to see some language. The other issue, we have the owner or owners of a solar facility shall notify the county whenever the facility is inactive from 1 year, at which they shall have 12 months to decommission the facility. We go a step further, and if it sits idle, and I believe we do 6 months, and I want to find it because it matters. Yeah, and they have to notify us by certified mail. So you might want to tighten up the notification on how they notify you. We actually go so far as to say solar facilities which have reached the end of their useful life or have not been in active and continuous service for a period of 6 months shall be removed. So, except if the project is being repowered or a force majeure event has or is occurring requiring longer repairs. However, the county may require evidentiary support that a longer period is necessary. We require them to be notified by certified mail. So you might want to make that a little tighter. We have you give them 12 months to decommission. You might want to add something. We say that if the owner or operator fails to remove the installation within the decommissioning period, the county may collect the surety, and the county or hired third party may enter the property to physically remove the installation. You might want to put some language in there that, okay, guys, you've got your window of time. If you don't do it, we're going to tell you we're going to come in and do it, and we're going to come after, we're going to cash that bond, collect that surety, and remove it if you sit on your hands and don't. And that's on page 13 of our ordinance. That's item 7. You know, the decommissioning is important because, again, none of us have lived through it, but you want to have as much protection for you to go after them as possible. And again, we think we've thought of everything. We'll know in 35 years if we've thought of everything. But, and then I sent Morgan a lot of things on battery storage. Now, what we have done, you know, some localities, Prince George County, which was one of the documents that I sent earlier today, Prince George did a separate zoning for battery storage. We included battery storage in our third revised zoning ordinance because the way the industry is going, if solar is ever going to begin to replace baseload power, they're going to have to be battery components to all of them eventually, because they're going to have to be able to store energy to upload to the grid. Either is fine. You can choose to have it separate. We just brought it in our section 16407, special provisions for battery facilities. So I sent a bunch of, it's I think 6 or 7 pages, it's maybe 100+ conditions in a separate document that the coalition put together. Because in your battery storage cup, you are going to want to be really specific about your training for your firefighters, how often that training occurs, on whose nickel that happens, any special materials that would take to put out one of these fires. And in the older generation storage, there was a certain kind of foam that you had to use. It was brutally expensive. No local volunteer fire departments had it. In this sort of 2 to 3 year window, that technology has changed dramatically. And what they're saying now is these things are in their containers. If these things are burning, let them burn. Let them burn. Don't open the doors. Don't go behind the fence. Your fire department's job is to prevent that fire from hopping the fence and causing a brush fire or catching anything else on fire outside the structure. That training is really important because the Dominion facility in Greensville County had a fire behind the fence. They had their volunteers pull up. They had a new volunteer that had not been through the training, but luckily someone more senior on the fire department that had been through the training, he was getting ready to pull out the water hose and start spraying through the fence. Well, that, yeah, water and electricity. I'm not an electrical engineer, but just saying, water and electricity don't mix. But this was a young guy, very excited. So thankfully, the senior person, no. Our job is to wait till that fire touches the grass, touches the trees. We don't touch the fence. But that's just one of those examples where, you know, and volunteers take everybody because we all need volunteers. And if they hadn't been through that specific training and had someone not been through the training that was on the truck with him, that could have gone badly. So the document that I sent Morgan that she shared with you is a pretty exhaustive list of conditions that you want to put in the cup relative to training. Dominion says they're getting around to it. Our planner, will reach out before something goes online and make them, in other words, don't leave it up to the developer, your planning department, your EMS director, reach out to the developer and do your training, because, it could go badly. But in the battery world, it used to be there's a certain kind of foam and you've got to go in behind the fence to put this fire out. And in the 2 or 3 years, the technology has changed. It's supposed to put its own fire out inside these containers. Don't let oxygen in, don't touch it. Y'all just guard the perimeter. So that's been a real big sea change just since we've done our battery storage project. So definitely, and I know that you're, the best, there are the National Electrical Code, International Fire Code, National Fire Protection Association Fire Code. We reference all of those fire codes in our zoning that these facilities must meet. So you might want to take a look at that. Certainly anybody putting one of these in from a liability perspective would be compliant. But again, don't leave anything to chance. So you might want to reference those national safety systems for batteries. And we do have that in that document. I don't know. I don't think you address the padding, what kind of pad. So we do address the foundation. Again, these always go on a concrete pad, and it's a pretty big and pretty deep concrete pad. We require that they keep their certifications current, and whenever there is a new certification or equipment is upgraded, they have to let us know. So you've got your battery storage language is pretty good. You might want to do, I don't think, do you have emergency lighting, emergency signage? You might want to have that if you unsee the alarm. Of course, that's all done by the developer. And, you'll obviously, if you entertain battery storage, you'll be working a lot with them on what this thing is going to look like. We did, and I don't see it in here, if one of these things ever really went bad, they are giant lithium-ion batteries. You would want to put in your zoning that you want to reserve the right to test your groundwater around that facility, because when lithium batteries leak, they make a mess. So I would put some language in there about groundwater monitoring. If there were ever any kind of breach of those big storage units, and it's on their nickel, not yours, that the groundwater is tested. If there were ever a breach where the battery unit leaked onto the ground around it, that topsoil, you would want to replace it, because again, it's got a lot of bad stuff in it. And again, that would occur on their nickel. So I would add that concept to your zoning for battery storage. Let's see, what are we? Let's see. We have some extra conditions. And I mean, I've heard some of the developers say, boy, y'all have a lot of stuff in your zoning. And we do, but again, we want to be upfront about the hoops they're going to have to jump through. For either battery storage or utilities, for solar facilities, you would have site plan requirements, and I know that you've got various bits and pieces of this addressed. But again, just like you would organize your CUP process and what they have to check the box on the application, I would recommend a separate section for your site plan requirements. And that would address things like site security. We're under construction right now on the 2,600 acre, 118 megawatt facility outside of Waverly. And of course, these things are insured. They have insurance on this particular project. I believe they have put cameras up at the entrance to the substation where panels and supports, all that steel, all of that stuff is being stored. Our sheriff is actually having the Waverly deputy on patrol ride by there twice a night as well, because that stuff does have value. If it were stolen, it's not on the county, it's on them. But you want to make sure in your site plan requirements, they're responsible for their own security. So if somebody walks off with, you know, $200,000 worth of steel cabling and copper wiring, you know, you say, we told you you're responsible for securing that stuff. It's not on us. Again, our sheriff is, as a kindness, keeping an eye on it, but make it crystal clear. They are responsible for securing and insuring the site, because you know, you don't want them to come back on you in any way. So we address lighting during the construction process, the site plan. We want to know how they're gonna, if they're working at night, how are they gonna light it so they're not violating any ambient lighting standards, so they're not keeping people up at night. I don't know that y'all would ever get a big enough project for water supply. We've got aquifer issues in our part of the world, courtesy of international paper. So, and I guess West Point has done the same to y'all. So we actually have language in the site section where, you know, if they're going to do an on-site well, they're going to have to go through DEQ and do a well and all of that, because and the chances are very good they'd say, we're not granting you a permit to dig an on-site well. But you want to address water, and frankly, if water is needed, the easy answer is they bring in tankers of water. I mean, that's the issue. And we actually say if the county, in consultation with DEQ, determines the installation of a well will not adversely affect existing users, they may proceed. I think we all know in the real world, their chance of getting a well permit from DEQ is about as good as me being a Victoria's Secret model, so it's not going to happen. I would also recommend you have in your construction mitigation plan hours of day when they can drive these pilings, you know, from 7 in the morning till 5 or 6 in the evening. You know, they could bring in lights and be banging these things at 8 or 9 o'clock if they're getting tight on a deadline. That would definitely probably make some noise for folks that live around it. So you want to do, you know, sort of work hours, what is you know, permitted. We go into some detail about laydown areas and staging areas. And again, we put a protection, no laydown or construction staging area within 200 feet of any dwelling. We actually had a real case scenario on this project. They wanted to do the laydown yard less than 50 yards from one of our low-income housing complexes. And we said, look, those folks already have enough issues. You are not putting this laydown yard next to this housing complex, you know, and so we really, and that required them sort of manipulating the site plan. So we've lived through, if you don't spell out where these laydown yards can go, they're going to put it in the most convenient area. That was the most convenient area for them, but it also would have, you know, bothered, you know, the 80-some people that live in that complex. So I would definitely, in your construction plan, you need to sort of think of the construction phase is where you have to shift in your zoning. Sort of the front of the zoning is, if I'm a developer outside looking in, what is required of me? And then when you get into the actual construction and what is our zoning going to say, what you can and can't do during construction, you then don't think, what does the developer think? You have to flip your brain. If I'm a citizen, what don't I want to put up with? So that is when we got into our construction mitigation section of the zoning. We talk about, you know, construction lighting has to be aimed downward, so we're not lighting up the night sky like Hollywood. We also address the erosion and sediment control plan, that during construction, you know, third-party review on their nickel. You know, E&S problems have to be corrected. We require an E&S bond, just like a road bond, and I think I saw that in yours. Did I see something about an E&S bond in yours? I know there was some E&S language in here. I will tell you, we are having, the issue we're having, again, it's a big project under construction. We have had 2 E&S violations occur. DEQ has been on site twice. Here's what's happening. The solar developers use subcontractors for almost everything. These subs come in there. They're not from the area. They don't know anyone. They don't know anybody. We had a sub that was unloading a piece of equipment in the middle of Highway 40. You know, what are you thinking? Well, VDOT got involved and the state police got involved and called the county, said, what are you going to do about it? We called the developer, what are you going to do about this? That sub was fired. But the labor market is tight everywhere. So could that sub be back in 6 months? Who knows? But the problem, the developers have their own construction managers. They have their own sort of job supervisors, 2 or 3 of those. But there are a whole lot of moving parts when this stuff is happening. So what you're going to find, and in this case also, so we had the VDOT issues, both of the E&S violations, it was a subcontractor. Don't know the rules, don't care about the rules, in a hurry, want to go home. And so those are the things that you have to the best of your ability, put in your zoning, that while this thing is being built, this is what we expect. And, you know, it does require our planning folks and our building official ride by there pretty frequently. You know, you need to, and then the other piece of this is the citizens' complaint. So one of the E&S was because a citizen who's smarter than the average bear about this stuff, he's a retired engineer, he called and complained. So if the county misses it, chances are good a citizen's going to find out because they're watching. Now the interesting thing is this citizen actually had to trespass on the property to really get pictures of the violation, so it was kind of a tit for tat. The developer's like, got it, DEQ's here, problem's been repaired, blah, blah, blah. And oh, by the way, you were trespassing on our property to get these pictures. So there are tensions that come when you're constructing these things, particularly the big ones. So, you know, we went into great detail in our site mitigation section, anticipating that these problems would come. Because again, in our zoning, we want the bigger projects, because with big projects come big siting agreements. And if we're going to live through the trouble of these things, you know, we're gonna reap the financial benefit. But with these big projects, you know, the 4,000 acre in Surrey, the 2,600 acre with us, when you're disturbing that kind of land, it's all gonna happen. I mean, before this thing is done, I expect a hot air balloon to land in the middle of it, you know, the way we're going. But anyway, you know, you try to put in writing in the construction, what we expect during construction of that developer. So that's kind of how we approached our ordinance. You know, again, the first part is for the developer, this is your process. The second piece, also for the developer, this is what we expect of you, but really thought through the lens of trying to protect the citizen during, and the county during construction. We don't want DEQ breathing down our neck either, because we weren't crystal clear that, you know, what is expected. So, you know, I think you all have hit really all the highlights. And what I would recommend, and will forward to Morgan, I believe we have everybody's that is a member's zoning in our electronic library. So that would be Charlotte, Halifax, Brunswick, Prince George, Richmond County. You know, Richmond County being geographically close to you, dealing with the water issues that you all deal with here, certainly being in the Bay watershed, which we in Sussex and Halifax and Charlotte are not. I would communicate with Richmond County a lot, because they've got big projects underway, and so they've tackled a lot of the detail in their zoning. And of course, their former county administrator, Morgan Quick, who we all know and love, Morgan has gone to work for Strata Solar. So, you know, hope springs eternal that bringing somebody in from local government will get these developers more dialed into manage your subcontractors. Please don't make all these E&S violations. We don't want DEQ down here. You don't want DEQ down here. So I'm hoping, you know, as much as I think people will miss Morgan, I do think that experience sitting where y'all are, where we are, I really hope begins to change the way developers approach these things. And I talked to Morgan just a few weeks ago, and I think he's, you know, he said it's been really interesting, you know, and so I see it as a plus, you know, towards the whole process. But, you know, I think the biggest thing you all might want to do is really discuss with your co-ops. Do you have any projects envisioned? And if you do, I would assume they'd be behind the meter. I'm only aware of 2 utility scale that the co-op system is doing in Virginia right now. They had one in our county. The PJM interconnect cost was so high it killed the project. It was going to be 75 megawatts for co-op use and going up to the grid. So now they are taking that site and they're going to do a 20 megawatt behind the meter, you know, and they've got, you know, 1,400 acres of land to do it on, because initially that site was much bigger for a 75 megawatt project. But between wetlands issues and PJM, so we are going to have to update our zoning with the definition for behind the meter for the co-ops, because we went to the co-op system last year and said, do you have anything planned, because we're going through round 3 of our zoning update. No, we just, we're hoping somebody will do the big utility scale. That fell through. They're now going to do a behind the meter, so we've got to add that definition to our zoning now that they've used in Brunswick. So definitely get with your co-op. And frankly, I'd reach out to Dominion too. So the other document, I don't know if you address solar at all in your comprehensive plan. We do. And I don't know if you all printed these out or not, but we actually, in our comp plan, we've mapped our transmission lines, which is one of the things I recommended y'all do. So we've got that as an attachment. We've got what we have online right now. So in our comp plan language, we are, as comp plans are, certainly more general and not binding like zoning. But we do declare sort of a preference, if you will. And in our comp plan, we did put, now some folks do it in their zoning. We did our minimum and maximum in our comp plan. Total size shall be 100 acres or more, but less than 5,000 contiguous acres. We're considering a project right now that is closer to 6,000, but we put the 100 to 5,000 in the comp plan as a guide. So again, if you all are going to focus on smaller projects because of your desire or the transmission system, within the county, if you're going to do a maximum, minimum, and again, you can do minimum or maximum acres. You can do a percentage of land mass we will dedicate to solar. You can do a block amount we will dedicate 4,000 acres to solar. Everybody does it a slightly different way. We went with the minimum and maximum in our zoning. We did the 100 acres because, like I said, we would rather attract the larger projects, and the way our county is geographically, we can do that simply because that's where you get your big siting agreements. But I wouldn't recommend putting maximum and minimums or percentages in zoning, because again, you got to live by that. Comp plan is a guide. It's a little fungible. It says to the world, this is our general desire, but because like I said, we're looking at one now that's closer to 6,000 acres, and if it were in zoning, we'd have to kick that project out. And the siting agreement is going to come in somewhere around $130 million, and I would sure hate to kick that out, or have to once again change the zoning. So in our comp plan, we do maximum, minimum. We address the panel coverage in our comp plan. So we allow a 65% panel coverage, and again, our thought process on that is the more panels per acre, the less acreage it's going to eat up. And again, with the double stacking of panels that they're starting with in Halifax, we're going to have to change our height language in zoning, and I don't know, I've got to believe from a mathematical point of view, if you're double stacking, you're doubling your percentage of coverage, because instead of having one panel, you've got two. So as that technology changes, I think we're going to have to do a little bit of tinkering. Also in the comp plan, this is where we do our boundaries from towns and our distance between solar facilities. We had a big discussion on the board about, do we want to put that in zoning or comp plan? I really argued hard for the town boundaries to go in the zoning, simply to protect any of these things encroaching on the towns. But I was overruled. So we have in comp plan, 3 miles, can't be any closer than 3 miles to an incorporated town. In driving here, I've seen lots of little towns. You know, I don't know how y'all want to consider that. And again, I think before you do that, that's where the transmission map is so critical. We were able to get away with a 3-mile boundary from our towns because the transmission system was, you know, with the exception of the project under construction before we had this language, our transmission isn't in the towns. Now, in Brunswick County, their main transmission line kisses the very edge of Lawrenceville. That language wouldn't have worked in their situation. So again, when you look at, if you desire to not have these things right on top of any of your towns, our thought process is this is where our population is centered. You're going to have maximum people looking at this thing if we do it around the towns. But again, before you do that, I think you want to know where your transmission is, because you don't want to set this rule, you can't come 2 or 3 miles from town, and then lo and behold, you know, you've got a 115 kV line that's right on the edge of one of these towns. So I would kind of assess that. But I do think if you've got a lot of little towns like most of rural Virginia does, to the extent you can protect those towns in that view shed, we felt that was important to do. And then the other reason for that was selfish on our point of view. If we had a business that wanted to come into town and expand outward and employ more people, we didn't want them so hemmed in by solar fields right up to the town line. If they needed 40 or 60 or 100 acres to expand, too bad it's covered in solar panels. So that was also part of our thought process, putting this in the comp plan. We also put in language located outside of forested areas to preserve forest resources, located outside of prime agricultural land. And again, it's in comp plan, not in zoning, so we have some fungibility on that. One of the attachments we did do is we also mapped our prime farmland. So we have several attachments that developers can review. So we've documented our farmland in the county. So that is helpful. Transmission lines, existing sites that we've also mapped out. So we're trying to make it clear that we want to preserve our agricultural and forestal nature to the extent we can. Now, our big project that's going to eat up the 6,000 acres is 6,000 acres of pine plantation in the middle of nowhere. So by putting that in comp plan, not in zoning, on this project, we do have the ability to say, well, we're going to make an exception on this one and go a little bit outside of what we state in our comp plan. There are extenuating circumstances on this one. So I think those are some of the things that, again, can give you all protection and kind of, you know, guide what kind of solar development you want. You know, because you've got it really is a two-handed deal. You've got to watch out for the citizens during construction. You've got to watch out for the citizens relative to siting. If you want this kind of development, and because there now is monetary benefit to having it in some cases, you don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face to make it so restrictive, you can never ever thread the needle. And that's the line you really need to walk between the two. What else do we have in comp plan? That would be, and again, this is where your mapping your transmission lines comes in. We say in the comp plan, we want projects located less than or equal to 1 mile from a transmission line. Now remember, right now, the developers will tell you if they're further away than 2 miles at any point of the project from transmission for utility scale, it's not going to work, because the longer the transmission, the weaker the power by the time it gets to the end of the line to upload. So 2 miles is the magic window for solar being attached to a transmission line. So we did it at 1 mile, but again, because of the way our lines are, that worked, and we've never had a developer have an issue with that. So we put that again in comp plan. Could we make an exception? Yeah, but you know, we've kind of put our guidepost in the comp plan. Let's see. So yeah, I mean, our comp plan is not, it's just 3.5 pages, but we do include those, you know, attachments. So, and I will say, my guess is when you all map your prime farmland, it's probably going to look like ours, which is the green, the dark green is prime farmland. So most of our county, you know, we have good dirt. And I think y'all have real good dirt over here on the northern neck too. So, you know, it's, and it's interesting, the middle part of the county where it's not real good. This is where we're getting project development now. And because this map is available, the developers, we're in the process, we're getting ready to get 3 proposals for this no man's land here in the middle. So again, if you go to the trouble of getting this data so a developer can view it, they're going to look at this and go, well, the comp plan says they want to preserve prime farmland. We're going to go to this wasteland here in the middle and see if we can make something work. And like I said, lo and behold, we're getting ready to get 3 apps for this section of the county. So again, going to this kind of detail might seem like a fool's errand, but what we found, we're not getting the requests now for the real intensive farming areas at the top and bottom of the county where the dirt's real good, because we've said, our comp plan says, and here's the map. So doing that kind of work on the front end can make these guys in planning's life a lot easier if you put out there what your expectations are. We found that to be helpful. So, you know, what I would recommend is a whole lot of smart people in the RSDC counties have done some I think really good ordinances. Had a conversation with Halifax County, and remember, I think I told you Halifax has 19 projects under construction, and they have a fair number of small ones. But there was an article in the newspaper from that part of the world. They've had a couple developers that have violated their construction management plan. Some serious E&S problems. And the other one was a vegetative buffer that they were supposed to plant trees of a certain type and height, and they hadn't done it. Halifax put in their conditional use permit, that they reserve the right to revoke the CUP for conditions not met. So in other words, right, we all say in decommissioning, if this facility goes idle for 6 months, we're going to start the decommissioning. Or if you notify us that you're taking it offline, then decommissioning will start. In Halifax's case, they've put in the CUP, if you don't do what is required of you, we're going to revoke the CUP. So they've got 2 projects that were in the paper that, and another issue was fencing. They hadn't, so lo and behold, you know, the developers were scrambling to get all these, because that hammer of, we're going to revoke this use permit was, you know, that sword of Damocles was getting really low, and they're like, oh, we better fix this. They mean what they're talking about. And I got a call from a couple developers that were like, can Halifax really do that? And I said, well, I guess the developer could take them to court and see, but the county administrator feels like absolutely they can do it. And, you know, the developer's reaction was, well, I guess they mean business. And so again, not trashing the development community, but I think their first couple years at this, they got spoiled by all of our naivete and zoning that was not very specific, did not demand a lot of them, was not crystal clear in our expectations, and now the world is changing, and their eyes are starting to open. So I'm going to talk to our county attorney. I kind of like that hammer in the CUP. I want to see what he thinks, you know, would it, but I do think, you know, the zoning is important, because if you deny a project, you know, there have been counties taken to court, Frederick County. There are a couple counties that have moratoriums that I think some developers are ginning up to maybe take to court. So, you know, if you deny a project, the way we look at it, does our zoning and does our comp plan back up our denial? In other words, is this solid enough to take to court and win? So we denied a very small project because of road issues, construction entrance issues, and we're pretty clear in here about our construction management plan, and the developer was fuming, and I think he was rattling a saber about taking us to court. And I said, well, I think our zoning clearly backs us up. And that was 2 years ago, and he never took us to court. So, you know, I think it's belts and suspenders on this stuff. You know, you want to, if you leave an opening, they'll probably find it. If you leave an opening, they'll probably use it. And, you know, for the guys in planning and the county administrator, you always want to put something out there. You know, to me, the approval of the project is one thing. Some of these developers have deep pockets, and if you deny one, that's where your zoning and comp plan are really, or zoning especially, is going to be tested. Your zoning is really going to be tested if you deny something. So, again, when you do your zoning, you know, you always in the back of your mind, if we say no, is this going to hold up? So again, that's why, you know, our first zoning, I think, was 6 or 7 pages, and our last version is now 18. And again, as we've gone through the second and third revision, because we've been under construction now, with our biggest one under construction, you learn as you go. And that's why we've gone from something that was a little bit longer than yours to now, you know, like I said, the 18 pages, because we're trying to address all of those contingencies. What happens when? So, you know, I think y'all have you've hit the high points in this draft, and I think, you know, what you might want to do is maybe better organize what you have and then flesh it out a little more. Break down your processes, maybe add a few more definitions. And then as far as your comp plan goes, if you want to have size suggestions or size caps, how do you want to handle the location relative to towns? And again, your transmission's going to determine a lot of that. Did you all map your lines yet?
We do not have transmission lines in Northumberland County.
None at all. So everything is three-phase power? I mean, that's what you've got, or three-phase?
The main line goes to Lancaster and then goes up to Richmond County and up to King George. And we do not have transmission lines according to the federal definition of transmission lines. That means, I understand that we're only going to get 5 megawatt, 5 to 10, 4 or 5 to 10 megawatt, and then our grid is going to be, well, the distribution grid is going to be maxed out from what they developers.
It really is, yeah. If y'all are, yeah. Okay, so.
We're very limited on what
So-
amount of solar that can come here.
So you're going to be dealing with 5 megawatts or under, for sure. The bad news on that is, wherever you've got three-phase power, that juice can travel. So you're not going to have a little bit of the benefit of knowing our transmission is here, this is the hot zone. I think then most of your county then is going to be ripe for 5 megawatt projects. I think that's where you're going to end up.
But all of those lines are on the main roads next to the villages, in the interior of the
Oh,
county.
good Lord. Huh.
We follow 360 and Route 200.
And 2/3 of the county is Northern Neck, only 1/3 is Dominion.
Just trying to figure out, is there any way for,
I don't know. What is it if it isn't?
well, how many electric co-op substations do you have in the county? Have you mapped those?
We had 3, and they just installed a 4th one for redundancy.
Okay,
They'd be all under 60% power
okay.
capacity for each substation. And there are
So,
no Dominion substations in the county.
there are no Dominions?
No.
Wow. Okay, so here's then, I think, what I would envision for y'all with the current situation. I can see Northern Net Co-op wanting to do solar within those 4 substations. I mean, that's, I think right now, unless now, I have also heard that we're never going to get to 16,100 megawatts of power, solar power, unless they build transmission lines. And I think Dominion I know they're building a new transmission line that's going through Brunswick and Mecklenburg counties to serve the data centers, the Microsoft data centers in Mecklenburg County. The other rumor I have heard, and so much of local government is connected in the dots, what have you heard, what have you heard? So the other gossip in Richmond is the data centers have gobbled up so much land in Northern Virginia where the real estate is so brutally expensive. And the folks in Stafford and Loudoun and Prince William are fighting these data centers. I mean, you talk about citizen armies organizing. So the data center universe is starting to look in places like ours. And remember, they are the huge drivers of a lot of this solar because they want the green energy, and they're the huge suckers of power. I mean, you could add all the people together in these 4 counties, and it wouldn't use what one of those data centers uses. So if the data center industry, which is incredibly powerful in Richmond, if the data center industries get run out of Nova, they're going to be looking at Rova, rest of Virginia, where, they can put these things. And, there are certain places in Virginia that are rural that have heavy-duty transmission, places like Surrey, they've got a nuclear power station. Louisa, nuclear power station. Brunswick, huge natural gas plant that Dominion just built. So you're going to have clusters of transmission in rural Virginia attached to Halifax, the Clover Power Station, the coal-fired power station. So you've got pockets of rural Virginia where there's a concentration of transmission attached to a big baseload generator. So in Brunswick, because of that natural gas plant, Dominion is building additional transmission. Could they then expect some data centers? Maybe so. For a place like this, you've got the land in the open space, but you've got no transmission. So it'll be interesting to see how this data center industry realigns the footprint of things. They're going to require transmission, and 16,000 megawatts of solar is going to require transmission. So where you all are now relative to solar, in 5 years or 8 years or 10 years, you could be in a different space. And, your zoning would have to change accordingly. But, my crystal ball says you're going to have a co-op project behind the meter that connects those 4 substations. So, but again, I'd probably have some conversations with the co-ops, because you're going to have a thorny issue then that basically the three-phase power that's going to carry that is along your main lines in the towns as you drive through 360, Callio, am I saying that right, Callio? Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm thinking of what I just drove through, and you're right, the lines are where the people are in the towns. So, but are the substations fairly isolated? Are they on the backside of the towns? Where are the?
They're spread.
They're spread. Okay. So, yeah. So then the co-op would, on their dime, then they do some three-phase to connect.
Dominion cherry-picked the kind of center of the county and got Callio, and what was left over is where the electrical co-op picked up, which is closer to the water and on the edges, interior of the county.
So, so for right now, I think you're fairly blessed in that you're not going to have to deal with immediately the headache and hassle that comes with big construction. The negative side of that with big construction comes the big siting agreement, which brings millions of dollars into the county through the siting agreement, through M&T tax, through real estate tax. That said, even a small project, you'll see a bump in real estate, you'll see M&T, and the law has changed, so even if it's a 2 or 3 megawatt or 5 megawatt project, you can do a siting agreement. The difference is the co-ops, because they're a co-op and not an IOU like Dominion or Appalachian Power, their pockets aren't as deep. So that's, yeah, but they may be in a position to do something. But regardless of a small project, and we all love our co-op, you still need to stick with your decommissioning. You need to, I don't care if it's Dominion or a Dominion project or a co-op project or a Strata or a Intergex or a AES, I don't care who the developer is, your decommissioning, regardless of size, regardless of owner developer, must be the same, because that's the ultimate protection for the county. And what I would recommend is that I have heard that in some localities, the co-op pushed back a little on some of the decommissioning. Again, because they don't have the deep pockets of the bigger utilities. And the locality's response was, we don't care. And that is the appropriate response. You know, we all love our co-op, but in 35 years when this thing has to come down, we don't care if you're Dominion or Northern Neck, this is how it's gonna be done and this is what the county expects. So, you know, I think, so as I see it, your challenge is how do you write zoning that would allow for some co-op projects behind the meter that would connect the substations and still protect viewshed in the town? You know, how do you straddle that line of that's your challenge, I think. That's going to be your challenge. But I think in all of the counties that are members, if you go through everybody's zoning, because again, everybody's geography is different, their transmission location relative to small towns is all different. I think Brunswick would be a good one for you all to look at because they have transmission and town issues. Prince George is another one. They've got some pretty dense population pockets because they're on the edge of Petersburg, Colonial Heights. And their transmission comes pretty close to where you've got lots of folks living. So those would be two that I think could have some application for y'all's situation here.
What are the populations of those two?
Oh, Brunswick is enormous. I think Brunswick is under 10,000 there. Sussex is 9,700. Brunswick is, I would bet my house it couldn't be any more than 12,000. Now Prince George, I think they're somewhere between 30 and 35,000. And they're a small county, you know, right on the edge of Petersburg and Colonial Heights and not too far from Richmond. So, and they're a small land county. So, and yet they've got some utility scale solar. They don't have any, I think their biggest project is probably in the 60 to 70 megawatt range. So, and I will make sure that their ordinances are in Ms. Morgan's email box, so y'all can kind of look through those. George Morrison is the planning director in Brunswick. He's a lovely, lovely gentleman. His deputy planner is Dawn Washburn, and you know, you could reach out to them. They're very, very helpful, very nice folks, because they have that kind of issue around Lawrenceville. But again, I would, so your challenge is how do you're limited in the projects you can do, but what I would flesh out and treat as if it were a great big project is your construction plan, your conditional use process, what you require of the applicant, and your decommissioning. You know, those, whether it's 5 megawatts or 500, those 4 things, that process should, in my opinion, and I think what you'll find in most of these zonings, it's the same. And so I would clarify that, and really talk to the co-ops and just say, and that is what Brunswick did. They went to their co-op while they were doing their zoning, and that's where we came up with that behind the meter definition of what co-op power is that's not going up to the grid. So they went to them and said, what are your intentions? Because we're doing our zoning and we don't want to shut you out. So tell us what you want so we can sandwich it in here and not cause you a problem. So I would definitely do that. So y'all can make your plans. So And then, if you don't have anything in comp plan, it may not need to be as detailed as ours, because I don't think you're gonna have the size and number of projects we do, but you know, you may wanna put some sort of reference in your comp plan to what your vision for solar is. So I will shut up. Do y'all have any questions?
Anyone have any questions?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
So it looks like our target is about 5 megawatt. That's what we're looking for. How lucrative is that for the county? Is that, what money-wise, what are we talking
So,
about roughly?
What is your real estate rate per 100? How much? 60? 61, okay.
61.
Most folks on the 5 megawatts on the small projects are doing the revenue share. That's 1,500 a megawatt per year, with a 10% escalator built in every 5 years. And so on the small projects, the math is simple. You take your M&T tax, but you, instead of using your M&T rate, use your real estate rate. So it's 61 cents 100 versus revenue share. I don't know, but that's the math you would do. So if you find that the revenue share works out better than going the M&T
That's what we did.
method, using the
That's
real
what we did.
estate rate. Now, again, for revenue share, you have to adopt that ordinance. We have a sample revenue share ordinance in the library. Several counties have adopted it. Again, we didn't do revenue share because when you're going for the big projects, after 115 megawatts, you're losing money if you go revenue share. So we didn't, because if you adopt revenue share, it must be applied to all of your projects. You can't pick and choose, I'm gonna do revenue share this one and M&T on this one. But I think most folks that are doing the small projects, and I will tell you, Scott Simpson, the county administrator in Halifax, he has done a lot of the small projects, and I believe they adopted revenue share. But Scott, he's done more 5 megawatt or less projects than any county I'm aware of. So that's but it's fairly easy math, M&T or revenue share. We did change the law 2 years ago to allow for that 10% escalator. So your revenue share over the life of the project will grow. And so then if you want to know ultimately what is it going to bring to the county, it's either going to be a 35-year or 40-year project, and you do your math based on the 40 years. You know, X number of year times. You know, they're not going to bring you the huge revenue. That's, you know, but they're also really probably not going to give you the hassle that comes with constructing 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 acres either. Because, like I said, you know, it's money, but we're dealing with it now, and so everything's a trade. Everything's a trade. But if you decide to do the revenue share, then you would treat it like any other ordinance. You'd have a public hearing, you'd adopt it, and we've got the sample language for that.
Who do you rely on for your decommissioning estimate?
We use Timmons Engineering,
Okay.
and I think a lot of folks do, but there are, I think Draper Aden merged with somebody, but there are 2 or 3 big ones in Richmond. Timmons is getting a lot of experience with this. I don't know, do y'all have an engineer under contract for the county? Okay.
So have you experienced any decommissioning yet?
No.
I mean, all your projects are fairly new.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the sad part, most of us on boards of supervisors are in our 40s and 50s, 60s on planning commissions. Like I said, when they decommission these things, I'll be in heaven, hell, or a nursing home, okay?
Yeah.
So, and that's the scary part. We're trying to troubleshoot for 35 and 40 years down the road. And as we've seen, the battery technology has already changed in how you handle a fire there just in a 2 to 3 year window. How you treat that has completely changed. And now we're double stacking panels on some projects, and that's already happened in a very compressed time frame. So, where will it be in 35 years? You don't know. You don't know.
Given our demographics, are we exempt from large projects realistically?
Right now, because of your transmission, yes.
Okay.
Yes. But again, with the data centers coming south, like we've heard they're coming, with Dominion building transmission, and the other political outlier is, if Democrats retain control of at least one of the bodies of the General Assembly, the Clean Economy Act and the mandates for the zeroing out of fossil fuels by 2045 and the deployment of 16,100 megawatts of solar by, I think it's 2030, maybe?
35, I think.
2025?
2035, I believe.
35, okay. Again, there's plenty of land to put the 16,000 megawatts of solar, but there's not enough transmission to connect it. So that's why, in my crystal ball, where you are now may not be where you are in 10 years or 12 years or,
The Richmond County solar project over on Mayhem Road is, 12, 14 miles the way the crow flies? That's a massive undertaking.
None of that power is coming back to the community.
No, they got a transmission line right beside it.
And that's what makes that site
Yeah.
attractive.
So they have a transmission line 14
Yeah.
miles from us.
So again, if that transmission line is that close,
Big company.
That's what I'm getting at.
so again, let's fast forward 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, you've got a major line,
And
Not
that's
too
from
far.
us. We can go, our county runs right up to their project. Their project on one side of the road and we're on the other.
so you could be looking at then, because this is also happening, projects are being phase 1, phase 2. If that project is literally across the road.
It is, literally.
Then you all could be in a situation where they want to extend phase 2 or phase 3 of that project into your county, but connect to the line
Right,
in
if you use
Richmond
your
County.
2-mile radius thing.
So
then
see,
that
right
certainly
now, it's not
opens up.
impossible to have a larger project.
If it,
Yes.
you're right, it's not, I mean, again, not being familiar with your county, but yes, if you've got that project right on your county line.
Exactly.
So again, then in that case, if they decided to do a phase 2 of 2 or 3 or 4,000 acres, then all of a sudden, you do get into the lucrative siting agreement kind of situation, where you really can monetize something that big.
Ridge Road is the county line, and we're on one side of the course and them on the other, and the project is coming right up to Ridge Road.
So again, depending on your appetite and interest,
Geographic.
that's where the phone call to Dominion, hey, if you all ever want to do a phase 2 on this project, we would be interested in entertaining putting that here. So that's why when I started out by saying communicate with your, in this case, not the developers, but you've got the co-op and you've got Dominion. what we are hearing from Dominion, they only want to be in localities where they're welcome. You know, they're a little bit different than some of the pushy developers that are from California and Utah and the Midwest. You know, Dominion wants to be a good neighbor because they power most of the state. So Dominion's approach has been, we only want to go where we're wanted, but if you want us, we'll be happy to come. So again, if you think you want to do something bigger, you know, they're the folks that manage that at Dominion. I can give you their numbers and you can reach out to them. I'm assuming you all have a Dominion, I call them the community rep for this area. And so that's what we've done in Sussex. Ernest Green is our Dominion rep, and he often comes to our board meetings. And so we reached out to them on the co-op parcel that had the PJM problems, and they're looking at it, because if the co-op decides they don't want to do the 20 megawatt behind the meter, Dominion's interested in it. So again, that's where you all as a group sort of decide what kind of development do we want. Because there are, where we are, there are enough localities right now saying no, that they're desperate for people to say yes. And because enough counties are saying no, that's why we know, and I don't know if you guys were on the call last week, I think you were. So you heard Delegate Sullivan say, some developers have come to me to put in the preemptive siting bill. I'm not going to do it. I don't think it's the way to go, but we know it's coming. I heard 2 days ago that Senator Marsden, who put in the bad take away local siting authority budget language last year, has now shifted his focus, and he's looking at a quota bill where every locality, based on any number of factors, and I don't think he's quite figured out how he wants to do a formula, but you know, land mass, square miles, population, transmission, every locality has to do something for solar. And the interesting thing is, he is a Northern Virginia senator, and you know, they're the ones kind of driving this. They want it, but they're putting it down here where we are. I've heard that his legislative proposal is going to require all of Northern Virginia, Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, Prince William, they're going to have to contribute. And of course, they don't have the land mass that we do, so they're going to have to do data centers, factories, rooftops, run solar down the median of I-66. You know, they're going to have to, you know, cover parking garages and solar panels, because, you know, people would probably pay a premium for covered parking, especially in the weather we've had this week. So he's like, I don't care, Nova, how you figure it out, but y'all have got to do something too. So we haven't seen that legislation yet, but I've got it on good authority. Some kind of approach like that is coming. So, you know, all of this is happening because counties like Dinwiddie, Southampton, Clark are putting in moratoriums. Frederick denied one project, and I think they're now one of the moratorium counties. They ended up in court. So the developers, and I was talking to Morgan Quick about it, he is also working in the state of Illinois, which did a state siting authority bill. And I said, well, Morgan, how is it working in Illinois compared to Virginia? And he's like, night and day. There's no pushback. The state says, you're going to do this. So we don't want to end up there. So again, back to my original point, because enough counties are saying no, if you reach out to Dominion and say, hey, we've got some interest, you know, they'll probably be down here within 2 weeks with their business development crew going, can we make this work? So again, but that's y'all's decision. Do you want to approach that or not?
Susan, with Dominion under some federal mandates to acquire a certain percentage, is that going to?
Well, there's the state mandate too.
Okay.
The state mandate is breathing down their neck even heavier than the federal.
Really? Okay. Is that going to encourage them to maybe put in some more transmission lines that will open up additional territories for them to be able to meet those.
I think they're gonna have to. Like I said, if, as long as the Democrats retain one body of the General Assembly, that Virginia Clean Economy Act and the mandates that are in it are gonna stay. If the Republicans take the Senate and hold the House, it was interesting to me, I was surprised with some of the windmills Youngkin tilted at, knowing he had a Democrat Senate. It was interesting that he did not touch the 16,100 megawatts of solar. And I was a little surprised, having been in Richmond as long as I have. I thought, surely he's gonna at least lower the solar megawatts in the Clean Economy Act, even knowing it won't get through the Senate. But I expected him to cut it in half to maybe 8,000 acres, or take it to 12,000, or zero it out. Nobody has touched it. Nobody has touched it. So, you know, I don't know what that means. And maybe just realized without two Republican bodies, it would just cancel it out. So they opted not to touch it. But again, for 16,100 megawatts, under our current grid system and transmission system, I don't think we're gonna get there. And I think if the data centers keep coming, they're gonna have to go in areas where they've got the land available, but maybe not enough transmission. So I think the whole thing is fungible right now.
On the projects, you said there was one 2,600 acre and
That's the one we're doing.
4,000 acres.
4,000 in
What
Surrey
kind of
with
land
another
is that?
2,000.
Is that wasteland, or is that, you're not using good farmland for that, are you?
Timberland.
In our 2,600 acre one in Sussex, it was some really crappy mixed hardwood that had been cut to death. Of the 2,600 acres, we didn't have any farmland in that project. It was all plantation pine, most of it owned by the Gray family. Gray land, a little bit of Westervelt maybe, and then just some, like I said, really low-grade mixed hardwood. It is a very low swampy area. They've had to make some modifications to it. I'm shocked, honestly. Well, we have it in here. Our average on that project, it is so swampy that we are only getting, we're taking 22.9 acres per megawatt. And remember, the industry average is 10 megawatts per acre. It has taken us almost 23 acres to get 1 megawatt, because that land is so low, so swampy. You know, Sussex County is pretty much a swamp till you get to the southern end.
And that makes a difference if the property didn't have much value to begin with.
It
as
does, it
compared
does.
to going to good farmland or good woodland or.
Yes, you know, a high grade, and the other map we're working on, so just as you map your prime soils, the Department of Forestry has a high-value forest map. So again, your high-value forests are gonna be predominantly your hardwood, with your high-grade white oak, your high-grade poplar, your red oak, walnut, not a lot of that around, but, and the problem we've had in Sussex, the hardwood we've got has been high-graded to death. So it's like the wild Mustangs out west. They pull the best out to adopt. They leave the sickly ones, the old ones, the deformed ones, and now your Mustang herd is a mess. Well, that's kind of how our hardwood in Sussex is, because, you know, they've pulled the best. You know, they've high-graded, and high-grading is terrible for hardwood. So, but yes, so on our 2,600 acres, it was plantation pine or super low value. You were not pulling any good wood, hardwood off that. So we didn't really mind that one too much, because we're not,
Right.
So again, that's where sort of mapping, and like I said, now that we've done this map that the developers can see, they're like, there's a lot of really prime farmland here. I live at the northern end of the county, so I'm right in the middle. I'm on a 400-acre farm right here, so I'm surrounded by all this good green dirt. But this middle, which is where our courthouse is, right in the middle of the county, that is been clearly identified as not our best farmland. This is where all our applications are coming in now.
That makes sense.
So again, we kind of do this as a defensive measure. So when developers are going, well, here's their zoning, and they really want to protect prime farmland, where do we go? We're going to go to the hole in the middle. So again, we did that to educate ourselves, but also point the developers, if you're looking, and the transmission does serve the middle of the county. So we're fortunate that in that middle, we do have transmission that coincides with the crappy dirt. So and again, that's not good, that's good luck and not good management. None of us can do anything about that, but, so.
My question concerns the decommissioning and the surety bond scenario. You can have a sole owner, joint owner, a general partnership, a limited liability corporation. My concern is you can have death, you can have bankruptcy, and all those things. How does the county protect itself from having to spend taxpayer dollars to redo
Going after these people in 40 years.
That's my concern.
Well, again, the good news on the smaller projects, your surety is not going to be nearly as big as something like what we're dealing
But
with.
we don't know the cost, so we're 30, 40 years down the road. You
Well-
just showed the difference with the battery scenario. We could have the same thing with
Yeah,
these things.
the cost.
I don't want to have a super fund to have, or junk solar farms.
Well, that's why I think what people are finding, I think we'll find at our first 5-year marker, everybody's bonding amount goes up. Some counties, and I think Halifax may be one, they are requiring not a bond or not an insurance policy, they're actually requiring cash. Now, some projects can't do that. I think one of the differences, though, at the federal level, they have just reflooded the solar industry with federal money. Biden's green energy plan, I think, ARPA, there was some ARPA stuff tied up with solar. So the federal incentives and subsidies, at the federal level, they've kind of doubled down on them. So I have heard that projects are now really awash in cash, courtesy of Uncle Sam. So if you ever had a time where you could really barter and say, I don't know, decommissioning is, we're saying it's $5 or $6 million on a small project. We want that in cash. If you ever had a chance to get that, now would probably be your window. So I believe Halifax, I think Scott is doing cash, but again, they are predominantly the small projects. We did a bond on ours, but it's one owner. So that's where the multiple owners gets very complicated.
Well, I love when some of these projects are LLCs. Why are they a limited liability corporation? They're trying to limit their liability.
We had our first one was an LLC, and the good news was, before the switch was flipped, Dominion bought it. I think what you're gonna find is with the LLCs are the land developer, and they are the LLC projects where they've amassed the footprint of the land. Before they're operational, if they're worth their salt, they're getting bought. And that's part of the reason PJM put their 2-year moratorium in place, and said, our backlog is, 2 years of projects. And so PJM gave a presentation in Richmond in July as part of a General Assembly solar summit, and it was really informative because PJM stood in this room of 200 people and said, one of the reasons we did what we did is we had to cull the speculative projects, and they said those words. So they knew what was happening. We figured it out, but the grid operator figured out, we've got a bunch of hucksters out here, sit down one afternoon, have a couple bourbons and say, let's build us a solar project. Enough. And I mean, they really did clamp down on, is this project viable? And they've gotten rid of the backlog, and they have upped what is required of a project to get through their process. And, in a nutshell, they've sped up their process. They've done their checklist of what this project has to meet before they're going to consider it. And I think you're going to find fewer and fewer of this LLC stuff going on, because the grid operator said, no, this thing has to stand on its own. And so, again, in our case, Dominion bought it from Virginia Solar, which was an LLC. And we did do our research on these LLC folks. We had a good idea of who they were, and we had heard early that Dominion was going to acquire the project,
Well,
so.
we've seen every project is a separate LLC. Not
That
the-
you all have seen.
Yes.
And again, they're all the little ones?
Yep.
The little ones.
3 of them.
They use the name of the road as John Q. Smith Road, LLC. John Blunden Road, LLC. So they were doing, every little project was its own LLC, and it wasn't under the company that was doing it. So you had all these little things, which obviously the red flag is waving hard, at least in my mind.
Well, again, I think that's where, I think this whole industry has changed, where in the first few years, it was the Wild Wild West that operated in secrecy in LLCs, because it was new and different, and everybody wanted to keep it hidden until it was, they were worried about opposition, da-da-da. And I think it's all flipped now. And again, because of the state mandate, the Dominions and the co-ops have realized we've got to come out of the shadow and own these things, because the mandate is on us. So other than our one in Sussex, we haven't seen any more LLCs come to us. Now, these 3 that we're waiting on the applications for, I haven't seen those. So, we might have an LLC on one of these apps, but again, I think that's where, a conversation with your co-op of where are you looking? What are your plans? And, phrase it, help us help you. We're in the middle of updating zoning. Do you have an interest? And if so, where is it? So you can kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. But it's interesting to me, knowing that there's not a utility scale transmission set of lines in the county, that people would be coming to you, because right now the only taker is the co-op, unless you're talking about the one that's on the county line that's adjacent to the Dominion project. It seems a little interesting to me. And so I guess, my question would be, are these LLCs working with the co-op? So do they all have the plan?
No, these were all
but
Dominion
not-
projects.
Oh, Dominion
Yeah,
Community Solar.
Yes.
Well, we had a big discussion about community solar. there was legislation this session on community solar. The really interesting thing about community, they call it community solar, shared solar. Dominion is being pressured. Community solar is not in the Clean Economy Act, but Dominion is being pressured to provide community solar from this is not coming from the Republicans. This community solar is coming from the environmentalists and some of the more environmental left-leaning Democrats. It was really interesting in the hearing. I was sitting next to several of the guys from Dominion, and I'm reading the bill, and I said, this bill doesn't, and the bill addressed a lot of things, but the bill was silent on decommissioning. And I said, if there's a community solar plan in a neighborhood, I'm assuming Dominion's responsible for decommissioning. And they kind of looked at me. You know, that whole thing has not really, I think, all the way been fleshed out yet. But again, did Dominion come to you all about those at all?
LLCs.
They were saying they were going to sell their project to Dominion. And I think they just wanted to get it ready to go and not even construct it and then sell it.
Because
but-
see, Dominion does RFPs for all of these things. And so just because you have a project doesn't mean Dominion's going to buy it. So again, you might want to reach out to your Dominion rep. And I think a zoning update is a good time and reason to do that and say, we know kind of now what our constraints are relative to what kind of solar we can do. What are your plans for this area? And again, there are so many counties saying no. If you're receptive to them, at this point, I think they're going to be pretty honest brokers because they're the ones with the gun to their head. But a lot of folks will aggregate land and say, oh, Dominion's going to buy it. Well, Dominion may have no intention of even looking at it. So again, I think where solar has matured enough that it's come out of the shadows, and the utilities and even some of the big developers that are reputable are welcoming counties coming to them. We want a little solar. This is what we've got. Do you have any interest? I'm very happy because I feel like localities now have a lot more power than we did 2 or 3 years ago. When all this started, we were getting hung out to dry. It was a secret. We were always the last to know. Wool's getting pulled over our eyes. And now, certainly the utilities are actively working with the locality. If you want it, where can we put it? We think this is good. Does that work for you? There's a whole lot more communication going on that's involving the locality earlier. And I think you get your best product in your best location if the county is involved at the beginning, not the last one to find out what's going on. And that's what happened to us with our LLC 20 megawatt. We were the last to know, and I'll never forget it. Dominion, at that point, had never appeared before a board of supervisors. And he has since retired, but Jim Eck, who is a senior vice president, and Bill Murray, who is still with Dominion as a senior VP, and I knew Bill very well. I said, Dominion is going to come out of the shadows. If you were going to buy this project, own it, and operate it, you were coming before my board. And son of a gun, if Dominion didn't show up from Richmond. We were the first locality that they ever came out of the shadows. Now, it's a different world, and Dominion is routinely appearing before boards of supervisors. They're actively involved. They're developing their own projects now. So I think that whole narrative has changed. we do have a lot more control. And your zoning is really, it can be a very powerful weapon. And so, and again, it's your destiny to choose, so you kind of choose your destiny in your zoning of what you want to accommodate, but it's now not unheard of. I think it's now becoming the norm for a locality to reach out to their power supplier and say, what do you guys have planned for us? What interest do you have in this county? Let's work together. And it's not this three-legged stool where nobody's talking to each other. And I think we're, now, would that change? Dominion says they're committed to solar, and that regardless of the Clean Economy Act, they're going to deploy, a certain number of megawatts of solar. And they've never, divulged, certainly Dominion is not responsible for the whole 16,100, and they've never said, we're going to deploy 10,000 megawatts or 12,000, but their business development team has told Robert and I, we are committed to deploying solar. If the Clean Economy Act goes away, that's not changing our mojo. So, you can take them at their word. But again, and to me, I look at solar on some parcels in counties like ours that while we pray for an Amazon distribution center, will we ever get one? Probably not. So, the right project in the right place, we look at as an economic development tool. So, I don't know what that land is like and how many people live close to the one in Richmond County, but to make the juice worth the squeeze, 100 megawatts, 120 megawatts. Well, our 75 megawatt siting agreement was 10 million. So, you could be looking at a siting agreement on 75 to 150 megawatts of 10 to potentially $20 million. So for a county like yours, just like a county like mine, millions of dollars is meaningful when our total budget is not quite 38 million for 9,700 people. So, if you decide that you want to look at that as an economic development tool, then you might want to reach out to Dominion and say, hey, we're interested. But, or if your citizens don't want it and y'all don't want it, then don't. But I mean, those are the options you've got.
I think that property across the road is owned by the paper mill, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why they could do that. And that's going to be, it's going to be, is there enough acreage that any project would have put together?
Paper mill ain't gonna sell that property.
Right.
So it's West Point, West Rock property?
They own right many acres in that area.
Have they owned it a long time, or?
It was originally part of it, West Point, whatever West Point used to be.
Chesapeake Corporation.
Chesapeake Corporation.
Oh, it's old Chesapeake land. Well, here's the interesting thing. The TMOs, the Weyerhausers, the Westervelts, the big timber management companies, they are actively, our 6,000 acre project is entirely Westervelt out of Alabama, timber company. It is Westervelt Plantation Pine, and Westervelt is actively marketing their woods to solar companies.
Part of this
Weyerhaeuser,
is in a conservative or something?
I don't know.
Weyerhaeuser
Stuart?
is doing the same.
Sorry, I
So,
Wasn't part of that property in Richmond County some type of timber conservatory or something?
Yeah, it was, I think it was John Hancock, I'm not sure if
Yeah,
that's
John
who owned
Hancock's
it or
part of
not. The
yeah,
insurance company.
because they bought a lot of the gray land.
Yeah, but they're
and
looking
stuff.
at money, that's all they're looking at. It's a trust.
Well, it's interesting, West Rock, their Covington paper mill is running at half steam. West Rock has sold their South Carolina paper plant. They have sold their Washington State paper plant. And I live in mortal fear for my own family sawmill that they're going to cut back at West Point like they have cut back in Covington, the mills in the western part of the state are really suffering, and the loggers are really suffering because Covington is lessened their output by somewhere to 40 to 50%. So and then I heard a rumor that Smurfit, the old Smurfit Stone that went bankrupt, that Smurfit and West Rock have announced a merger. And I have not read the blip on my phone, but you know, West Rock is certainly going through some challenges, and the paper industry in this country is changing dramatically. Exactly, and you know, newsprint, writing paper. I think the thing that has saved West Point is they produce so many pizza boxes, food boxes, and boxes for Amazon. That's the only thing that has kept West Point. The Covington mill does high-end packaging, glossy feedstock kind of paper, and they've lost enough of those customers. They've idled the third shift. They've sent people home. So, you know, West Rock is going through quite a situation right now.
Just getting back to solar.
Yeah.
You're now on your third iteration?
Our
Okay.
third zoning
So
revision.
the people who are building now are operating under what, the second iteration?
Well, it depends on where you are. I mean, you know, Brunswick just completed their zoning. So what they approved last year is their first solar ordinance. But I would say their ordinance is probably as sophisticated as ours is.
Okay, I thought we were talking about the Sussex ordinance.
Sure, yes.
Okay.
Yes, so ours is, we're on our third one. We did
Okay.
our first,
You're on your third, aren't you? What happened to the second?
we updated it. That's what I'm saying, we're on our third. This is our third revision.
Okay.
Our
Third
first-
revision to the original
Yes,
first?
yes.
Okay. Somebody's got a project underway, and he goes from 6 pages to 18, mid-project. What happens to him?
They operate under the ordinance that their CUP was approved.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and we've got that. This 2,600 acre project is actually operating on the second ordinance. So yes,
Okay.
yes, that's what happens.
Given the time, I'm sure you got a long drive back.
Oh, yeah, I drive all the time, so,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But I think we had talked about 7:30, so I don't even know what time it is. Oh, my God,
It's
it's
about
8
8.
o'clock. Okay, well, there you go. So I have to be in Richmond at DEQ in the morning for the regulatory meeting. So we're in the process of updating the DEQ solar regulations, and tomorrow, the state forester is getting involved with buffers and view sheds. And so I think he's going to be presenting a plan that there are some localities that still don't have any zoning relative to solar. And what's happening there is view sheds are being severely impacted. And so I think the loose concept is there will be a minimum statewide buffer along primary and secondary roads when you're clearing for solar. So, you know, if your locality has zoning, then it stands. If you're a locality with no zoning at all for solar, at a minimum, the state will say the clearing will preserve an exterior buffer. And again, I think that goes to citizen and viewshed protection, and I'm not aware of any developer that's opposed to that, so anyway, so yeah, that's where I have to be in the morning, so. Time flies when you're having fun. Anyway, any more questions or any more issues?
One question,
And-
Susan.
Yes, sir.
When you have your conference calls, or is that done through Zoom or done through?
It's done through Zoom, and you can participate by video or audio. And I think, as I explained before, there's no limit to who from a locality can participate. So if you've got 15 or 20 people that want to be on the call, the only thing we ask is that we have your email addresses in advance of the call so we can send you the invitation. By the same, I think forwarding, you could forward to somebody in the county, but then we're going to have to go through, we don't recognize this phone number. So what we ask, just for planning's sake, is whoever wants to be on, just send us the email address a couple days before the next call.
All right. All right, any more questions? If not, Susan, I thank you for your time.
Well,
It's
thank
very-
you.
it's been
So
very
I've flooded Morgan's inbox. I think there are 5 documents there so far. So you've got our zoning, our comp plan, the 2 battery storage, the Prince George battery storage ordinance, battery storage cup conditions, a Dominion battery storage presentation that's just informational, but it kind of walks out their plans for battery storage. And then, before I go to bed tonight, I will send you, Morgan, the rest of the ordinances that we pulled from the Google Drive. And we're in the process of, we're having some access issues, so we're getting ready to redo our document library with a new, process and sign-in. So once we perfect that, everybody will have it. So you can go online anytime and pull up a member's zoning, site plans, whatever.
Need a data center.
We're going to need a data center at this point if we keep getting documents, but
Yeah.
yes, so. The other thing, our members, we are generous with if there are pieces of our ordinance you like, help yourself. I mean, it's a public document, it's not a protected document, and, part of the reason of the coalition is so nobody has to reinvent the wheel. So, we share and share alike, so help yourself.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And I can come back as often as you want, or if you want to do things by Zoom. I think I went to Brunswick over the 2 years, probably 20 times. So, that's part of the coalition. We come as often as you need us. If there's, another aspect of this, if Robert and I don't have it, we can find you the person, and encourage you to call each other within the counties, so.
When the General Assembly's in session, do you send out alerts to the
Oh,
members?
we do.
I kinda figured that.
We do, and we do calls during the General Assembly session. Typically every other Friday unless something is really exploding. And we do send out alerts. If we need you to call your legislator, we'll send you the bullet points. This is the problem with this bill. This is why we support this bill. And we do all that for you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, General Assembly is coming.
Yes, we know.
It'll be here sooner than we
Well,
think.
You make sure and have a safe trip back.
I will make sure I don't see any deer. I had a run-in with a deer last March, and I'm not inclined to have another one, so I'm gonna
I had that one too.
keep my eyes wide open. My Farm Bureau insurance will hit the roof if I hit another deer, so, anyway. Well,
Any
thank y'all
questions
so
from the audience,
much.
Steve? Any questions from the audience? Is that available?
No, we know.
You're good.
Oh,
You know,
here.
if you're on the early, we had to live it early.
They
We
don't
started
understand
in
this.
2017.
It was 3 on there. 3 on there.
There you go.
Otherwise, it would not have gone well, so. Anyway, thank y'all so much.
All right,
It's
thank
really
you
good
very
to
much.
see y'all.
Thank you.
Call
Thank you very much
anytime.
for your time.
care.
All your trip and everything.
Yep, and Morgan, I'll flood your email some more before I go to bed, so. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you,
so
ma'am.
much.
Thank you.
All right. Luttrell, have we already had one conference call with Rural Solar?
We have Mr. Basie, Mr. Marson, and Ms. Stewart McKenzie sat in on that call.
All right. All board members and anyone else must be notified of all these calls so we can attend.
All right, we will notify you.
Yeah. So you send all our email addresses to her so we can be informed of all information coming.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
the only question is, if three or more board members join onto this, do we have a problem with a public meeting thing? Or is this
It's not
just-
in person, it's only virtual.
It's still a meeting.
No, it's a meeting, but
I know there is a Supreme Court case, he's just being consulted, but without doing business. Just check with Eric on that.
We will follow up with legal counsel on that.
Oh, I mean, not send it, but I think that's something we've got to keep in our mind. Three or more together is, you can do many things three or more together, but you can also get in trouble.
But,
Two or three candidates there.
but all board members and anyone else needs to be notified
Yeah.
of anything so we can keep up with it. It's not just for staff. All right. Only other item we have is to convene in the closed meeting. Planning Commission have anything else that they want to discuss with us? Or
Mr.
does
Chairman.
staff have anything?
Mr. Chairman, I suspect you're going to look over these recommendations that were brought up here tonight and cipher through them and send back to the Planning Commission what you want us to work on. Any or all, give us some guidance on it.
I kind of think that's where it's going to be heading.
Well, either that, or since we've had a public hearing on it, we can make changes then, we'd have to re-advertise. So, I mean, there's two ways to do it.
Yeah.
But we've got to read a lot of stuff to even think about doing anything. But, yeah, we can make changes with what's before us, but if it's more restrictive, and more than likely it would be, we'd have to
I
re-advertise
think
it.
90% of it would be.
Yeah, I think it is too.
And we carried it over to come up with on September's meeting.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to,
No, we're not going to
take any action on it.
No. But that's not to say the planning commission couldn't look at things and make some recommendations to ourselves without going through the formal, or like that. Maybe a way to speed things up, so to speak. But whatever, we all need help on this area.
Chairman?
Yep. Yes.
As of now, if somebody applies, they're going to be applying under the old ordinance. So I'm just putting it out there. Perhaps we just perhaps might consider passing this just to hold the place so that any new projects would have to go to these standards, and then we can work and make it better in the future. Of course, it's up to you all how you want to do it, but if somebody came tomorrow and applied, they'd be using the old ordinance, so.
Yeah.
Might be good just to have a placeholder ordinance for
Yes.
the time it takes us to work on fixing what she talked about.
Sussex
Of
is
course,
in
it's
there
up to
third.
you all how you want to go.
All right, that will give us something to certainly think about right there. I know what's proposed is a lot better than what we already had. All right, any other questions or comments?
No.
I think it was a good idea to have this gal up here. I think staff did a great job, I think, on what we had. But she had a lot of little things, protective things that we can certainly use.
Oh, yes, yes. Staff has done a wonderful job. That they put a lot of time into this.
I know.
Put a lot of time. And the advantage of having Susan come is we're able to draw from 7, 8 other counties all this other knowledge, which is going to be very helpful to us, and hopefully make staff's job a little bit easier. Staff have any other comments? All right. Planning Commission have any other comments?
I think we're good.
All right, well, we will need to go into closed meeting, but you'll have to close out so we can go.
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made, seconded, all those in favor? We're gone.
All right, thank y'all for coming.
Fast.
I will send you all the emails that she referenced, the ordinance. I'll do that Monday morning.
Why, you on vacation or something?
Jimmy, I gotta take his call real quick.
All right, are you taking the phone?
Yeah, I was gonna use little boy's room.
You're right about that.
All right.
Sounds good.
Soon to be soon.
All right, we coming back to, just for the board's information too, the email that was sent out for that invite was sent to the board on August 18th. For
what's that, Lance?
that particular meeting, that Rural Solar Development Coalition meeting, that email was forwarded to the board members.
On which date was that, Lutton?
I believe it was August 18th. That's when that was sent. Just for your information, that it was sent. so.
All right, okay. I just didn't remember seeing it, that's why I said something, send everything out to everybody. August 18th.
I remember saying it.
Oh, I saw that, didn't, it's from, Robert G. Crockett.
Correct. And he's part of the Rural
Yeah.
Solar Coalition.
I was thinking that was something else. Yeah, that was with the delegate Rip Sullivan.
Robert G. Crockett, yeah, I see it
Correct.
now.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
One, I think you, forwarded or something?
Correct.
All right.
Yep. So, but just as a heads up,
Sure.
that may be how the emails come through, just as for your information, with different titles.
Yeah, it'll ring a bell when it comes in.
Ding-a-ling-ling-ling.
We go.
All right, are you ready for the motion? Need a motion for the Northumberland County Board of Supervisors to convene in closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Freedom of Information Act 2.2, 3711A1 for the discussion and consideration of personnel matters. Invited to attend the closed meeting as necessary are the county administrator and assistant county administrator because they are deemed necessary and their presence will reasonably aid the board in its consideration of topics to be discussed pursuant to Virginia FOIA Section 2.2, 3712F.
So moved with Mr. Tadlock read.
All right. Got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now in closed meeting. Lutton?
Yes, sir.
Drew? You gonna give us the language we need to come in?
I need a motion that the Northumberland Board of Supervisors return to public meeting and certify by a roll call vote that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting.
I make a motion to do what Mr. Tadlock said.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, Tommy?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Jimmy?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we increase David Willard's salary $6,611.16.
Second. I got a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, in that it does include the benefits.
Yeah.
It's not strictly salary.
I amend my motion to include salary and benefits.
All right, the motion's been amended. All right, any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against?
As I stated, I'm not voting either way on that.
All right, so
You're
you're gonna,
abstaining.
you're gonna abstain.
Abstain.
All right. What else do we have, Mr. Tadlock?
The only other item, we do have the applications due tomorrow at noon for the board
Yeah.
position that is open. I don't know if the board wishes to set a special meeting to review those applications. If you wish to,
Why can't we meet them? A little early to do them, since we got a meeting next week.
I didn't hear you, Jim.
I said, let's, all right, I would like to see us just meet earlier on the day of the meeting, go to applications. Still another day. I'm gonna be busy.
What does the board want to do?
Or does that review include interviewing them, or are we just gonna do a paper review without any interviews?
and just remember the time in which you have to do that has to be done by the 19th.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah.
So we are pressed for time,
So
so
our,
we keep
our
waiting.
meeting next week is the 14th, so.
I don't mind having a special meeting. I can meet, Monday or Wednesday. I can meet Friday too, for that matter.
Right?
I can't say, I didn't, thought I had my calendar, but I don't.
All right.
Monday, you looking at the 11th
Yeah, I can do 11th.
or the 13th?
Yeah. I could do it the 15th if we wanted to meet on a Friday, but I don't recommend that.
So what time?
Going to be in Richmond, 10 o'clock Friday, Monday. The doctor's appointment.
Expect to come back?
I'm sure hope so.
Yeah, otherwise that picture of Spit's gonna get warmed up off real quick.
And last time I went, they put me in the hospital.
Well, let's do it the 13th then, if that works for
The
everybody.
12th, 13th.
One of these times, I'm gonna bring a warm picture of Spit in here for you.
All right, 13th, when you want to do that, at time? Want to do it 5:30?
I can't do it.
o'clock?
I told you that, if you can't, I don't see why we can't just meet earlier. Instead of, getting
I
extra.
know I can't do the 13th.
Right, I
The
mean,
14th, Jim, is what you want to meet on?
It sounded like that's gonna be
Yeah.
it. I can't do the 12th, I got a squad meeting night.
All right, you want to, how early do you want to meet?
right,
4:30?
I don't care what time we meet.
Is the hour going to give us time enough to meet?
Hour and a half?
I guess, are you just doing a paper review, or are you bringing them in and?
Which way do y'all want to do it, in person
I
or
don't
paper?
care. I just wanna make sure we know what we're doing.
It don't make me any difference.
Let's just let's go over the paperwork.
All right, we don't need but an hour. So 4:30,
That's fine.
Jim?
Yeah, 4:30 is good.
All right. 4:30 will do it, if that's all right for everybody.
So we don't have a 2 so far, right?
Only have two.
And tomorrow's the last day.
12 noon.
High noon.
That's right, high noon.
All right, I'll put that in my phone so I won't forget.
All right,
Yeah, 4:30.
that'll work out for everybody, really.
Right.
All right, anything else we need to do?
Did you get anything from VDM yet, recently about a meeting for tropical storm now, Hurricane Lee?
We've got a conference call tomorrow, but given the models that they're popping up.
They don't know.
Yeah. If anything comes out of it that's alarming, I'll certainly reach out to the emergency agencies, but
It can go this way, it can go that way, it's keep on
Yeah.
straight.
so I think they're doing it more out of precautionary, just get everybody's attention on it, but
Well, the Hurricane Center has got my attention when I see it's 130 miles an hour wind right now, expecting to get 160.
yeah.
It was just a tropical, or just a low-level hurricane this morning.
I'll relocate and come on back home when it's done. Yeah, I'll look at it.
All right, we got anything else?
Yeah, are we doing anything to encourage these people to cover the trucks when they're hauling all this stuff on it? I see 2 or 3 where it's falling off. Somebody gonna get hurt. Hey, look, I want to congratulate VDOT for cutting that grass on those roads, man, because people don't have to pull out now. They can stay back and see down the road, Milam Bay and the other one too.
Isn't the litter committee handing out truck cover,
Yes, sir.
have they got them yet?
They haven't received them yet. They put in for a grant for those items,
All
but
right.
the litter committee did submit a grant for that.
So you gotta wait on the grant till they can get them, Jim. Then they'll be able to get them. Got any other business?
Seem like we still could put something in the paper to encourage people, because somebody,
People gotta read the paper too.
well, even
More
read
importantly,
the paper, put an announcement on the radio, man, we got, somebody's gonna get seriously hurt.
All I
As
see
long
is,
as we do our part, then,
all I see is furniture on the road now. More furniture
no,
now.
I see a lot of grass and
see a lot of
stumps and
5-gallon
everything
buckets.
not
Yeah,
covered
plenty
up.
of buckets, always buckets.
Well, the problem is, it's a law right now, so they're supposed to know the law anyway.
Yeah.
See, that's it.
If you lose it,
A
you're
lot of
supposed to
people
stop
don't
and
know
get
the
it.
law.
You're supposed to have it covered, or you're supposed to have it secured by cover or strapped
Right.
down, or whatever.
And, hey, look, a lot of them don't know the law. And, I
Well,
don't
Jim.
know. I don't know if we shouldn't put something in the paper reminding them, because, you
What?
know,
One thing what I see, Jim, is a lot of them coming out of Bakewater and all on the weekend. The trash is on top of the roof of the car. That's where they're taking it. That's how they carry it out. And you know how long it stays on top of the roof?
yeah, I know.
How's the brush pile there, anyway?
Brush pile,
Has
big.
Has it gone down any?
No, it's getting bigger. And I've told him about that burning because I'm damn tired of putting up with smoke for 2 to 3 weeks.
What time do you start burning that? After 4?
He's burning there?
Burning.
He's talking about something different.
Leon's not burning.
No.
No. I'm talking about a different pile.
Okay. I
I'm
was
sorry.
making,
I'm
hey,
sorry.
I don't know it, because
I think it's time to adjourn or.
Yeah, it's time.
To carry over to.
Yeah.
You can burn now, right?
yes,
Huh?
yes.
After 4?
You can burn before 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
People
Now,
ask.
do we want to carry over or do we want to close? Adjourn.
Carry over.
Well, we're gonna meet at 4 with that. I move that we carry over till 4 o'clock on Thursday, September the 14th.
All right, got a motion, got a second. All right, I ain't gonna ask for any discussion on that. All those in favor say aye.
Because then you'd have to have a special meeting.
You're gonna have to have a special meeting, yeah.
The press will get notified. but-
Just gotta make
All
sure
right.
you close that one before you
Yes.
go into the.
Yes.